10 years ago, the dying Western video game industry had to prop up console sales. They had to, like, invent a new gaming franchise out of whole cloth to try and pretend the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One were viable. They had nothing that could compete with Zelda, with Metroid, with Mario, with Pokemon, with Tokyo Mirage Sessions, with Xenoblade Chronicles X, with Star Fox Zero. They were sitting there just trying to tell themselves that, like, oh, people love Dragon Age Inquisition. They love all the gay sex scenes and the woke nonsense. Like, let's not release formal sales numbers at all and just give it Game of the Year awards and then do the same thing 10 years later with Baldur's Gate 3. Like, let's just... Nothing was taking off, right? Nobody was buying any games. The Xbox One and the PS4 were complete failures in every way, shape, and form. And so, the gaming industry, in their desperation to try and keep themselves relevant, looked at the mediocre, uninspired, dark fantasy setting of The Witcher 3 and seriously tried, to pass this off as the greatest game ever made. Geralt of Rivia is such a compelling literary figure. His books sell millions of copies. He surpasses the work of Tolkien, of C.S. Lewis, of the great fantasy writers like Elric of Melibene. Like, it far surpasses everything from the Western literary world. Polish developers are superior to other developers, especially those Japanese. Like, this was the mindset of the average gaming YouTuber around that time. They came out and tried to gaslight people into thinking The Witcher 3 was some kind of masterpiece, that it was some innovative thing, that it had a really interesting story and characters and themes, that the books were all-time fantasy classics. They're not, by the way. That they tried very hard to pass The Witcher 3 off as, like, the AAA game of that generation. And it really was the last stand of that style of promotion and hype, right? 2015, I think, was, like, kind of the end of the AAA, like, boom that started in 2007. Right? Because The Last of Us set an impossible standard by 2013, right? The Game Journals, like, established that as, like, the all-time, like, Citizen Kane of gaming that would never, ever be topped, right? It was supposed to surpass Ocarina, right? It was supposed to be, like, the game that proved that video games were an art form, right? And so, like, they set the bar so high, they hyped The Last of Us so much, it was impossible for them to go back and, like, surpass it with, like, the next big thing. So, like, with The Witcher 3, even though it sold way more copies, was way more popular, I'm sure won more awards, right? Even though, like, I'll come out and say The Witcher 3 was better than The Last of Us. Like, even though it was better than The Last of Us, like, it never reached those same ludicrous, like, levels of praise and hype, right? It wasn't allowed to surpass The Last of Us in the eyes of the corrupt PlayStation-oriented gaming press, right? The Last of Us was the untouchable gold standard, and The Witcher 3 was just the new shiny thing that you could play while you waited for, like, The Last of Us Part 2 to come out, right? That was the mindset at the time, right? The Witcher 3 was hyped up to pad out the release schedule until games started coming out again, right? Until the next generation of consoles, right? So The Witcher 3 blew up. It sold like 45 million copies or whatever. It's one of the most overrated games ever made. And now, a decade later, after the failure of Cyberpunk 2077, CD Projekt Red has finally started confirming things about the inevitable Witcher 4. Remember when they said they were never going to bring Witcher back, that it was done, that they were going to move on to bigger and better projects, right? How Cyberpunk was going to be their next big thing? How did that work out for you, buddy? And don't try to tell me the game was fixed and they salvaged it and they made money off of it. That is a damn lie. So, anyway, of course, CD Projekt Red had to have has to go crawling back to the Witcher IP because they fundamentally have nothing else. That's the thing people don't really understand about them is that like they can't innovate. They didn't put out anything new or interesting. They didn't like build off the success of The Witcher 3. They didn't like expand their studios and put out new games and new franchises. No, they put all of their eggs in one basket with Cyberpunk 2077 and did everything they possibly could to try to get people to like support that project. And when it completely failed, they're in this rough spot where they have to like go back and like drag out Geralt's declining corpse from its casket, right? Because The Witcher 3 was supposed to be the end, right? They pretty conclusively ended Geralt of Rivia's story with The Witcher 3, right? So what are they doing now? What are they doing with The Witcher 4? They are going to come out and replace Geralt with another protagonist. And of course, considering Geralt of Rivia has one game that people care about, The Witcher 3, like people aren't going to want to play as a Witcher game that doesn't have Geralt in the protagonist role. Like, I'm seeing people like spurt out nonsense like, "Oh, Ciri can be the protagonist," but nobody cares about Ciri. Nobody cares about The Witcher as an IP, right? You can't spend so much time hyping up Geralt of Rivia as the greatest video game character ever, and then have him immediately be replaced by the next game. It's like how like Solid Snake got replaced by Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 2. Yeah, he was replaced, but not really. Like all that did was just kill Metal Gear Solid's momentum going forward and led to like the downward spiral we're in today, where it's like a completely dead IP, right? 2 and 4 were garbage because of that decision, right? There was no recovery from that. And The Witcher is in the same similar position where they overhyped their protagonist. They overhyped like Geralt of Rivia, and they're going to have a problem moving away from him. Even if you like take away like people's concerns about this new protagonist, that it's going to be like some woke DEI like ESG score like higher like thing, right? CD Projekt Red is actually one of the most like ESG infested companies in the industry, I believe. I've straight up seen them brag about it on YouTube videos. There is no denying that the Witcher IP was mishandled, right? Like, if they were going to follow up on The Witcher 3, they really should have started production on it immediately. Yes, they should have made Cyberpunk 2077. Yes, they should have branched out onto other products. But if you have a major AAA hit like The Witcher, if you have this fantasy universe that people want to see more of, like, yeah, you should be expanding on that and doing more with the setting. But they couldn't do that. They couldn't follow up on The Witcher because they didn't have the talent. They didn't have the ability to produce a new original story featuring Geralt of Rivia, right? They didn't have the ability to go back and make the game, make a follow-up to that game, right? They couldn't do anything. They did not have the talent. They did not have the skill. They did not have the innovation, right? They could not do it. And so, years later, what makes you think anything has changed, right? I'm going to say now the same thing I said when like Cyberpunk 2077 was being hyped up back in the day, like back in 2012. Like, this game has absolutely no chance of being good. These developers have no ability to produce good, interesting content. They need to just go to bed and just give up. Okay, there is no denying this, that The Witcher is a declining IP. Nobody cares for it. It is going to be forgotten in another 10 to 20 years. It's time to stop pretending that The Witcher 3 was anything respectable in the video game industry.